Welcome to episode 104 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. The season is officially over. The Toronto Maple Leafs losing 5 games to the Florida Panthers in the second round after finally slaying their demons in the first round and winning a playoff series for the first time in 19 years. The Leafs followed that up by winning just 1 game in the second round. 4 of the 5 games were 1-goal games. 2 went to overtime. Frustrating way to end the season. But we are going to break down what happened in the second round, what went wrong, and then, of course, the main theme of this podcast, where the hell do the Leafs go from here? So we are going to give you our thoughts and opinions on all of that. But before we get into everything, it is time to officially welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How you doing today, man?
I think I'm doing how most Leafs fans are doing, still getting over that annual playoff loss. It stings, man. It stings because the only way I can describe it is sad. Leafs fans are allowed to be sad right now because even beyond losing another year with this team of not getting where we want to be, this one was an opportunity. And I'm not going to sit here and say that had the Leafs beat Florida, they would have went on and won the Stanley Cup easily or something like that. But here we were in the second round playing the 8th seed, heavily favored. That's an opportunity to get in the conference finals. And now when you're in the conference final, 1 of 4, man. 1 of 4. And I think even to say the Leafs had a 25% chance to win had they got there would have been modest. But part of it, man, part of being a Leafs fan looking back, I just fear that this may be one of those ones we look at 10, 15, 20 years from now. And we're like, wow, a lot of things went the Leafs' way. There's all those things you can't control, like teams upsetting other teams. So it stings. And it's a gut punch of how they lost, but at the same time, it's kind of like an overall scope thing. And we'll get into that and how we feel about the entire group.
It feels really similar to 2021 when they lost to the Habs in the first round, because the red carpet was laid out that season as well with the North Division. You beat the Habs in the first round. You play the Winnipeg Jets in the second round. And not that it was the easiest road ever to the Cup final, but it seemed like things were lined up for a Leafs team that had a great regular season, just like this year. They made great additions at the trade deadline. They got more heart and grit and truculence and all that. But it obviously didn't work out. It's a disappointing end of the season. And let's just jump right into this series in particular, Lepore. I think the story of the series, and you can tell me if you disagree with me, was Sergei Bobrovsky. At the end of the day, sure, we will look at the core 4, and they only scored 3 goals on 91 shots on Sergei Bobrovsky in the series.
That's possible.
Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander had 91 shots on goal on Sergei Bobrovsky in the second round and scored 3 goals. Crazy. Bobrovsky finished the series with a .943 save percentage, and depending on what website you look at, he had around 9 goals saved above expected.
Oh my God.
He was spectacular. So I think he was the story of the series. And sure, Leaf fans want to blame the officials, and they want to blame all kinds of other external factors. And the core 4 deserves a lot of the blame because they didn't produce. They're paid all that money and they need to score goals, but I do want to give credit to the Panthers goaltender, who I thought was spectacular. The Leafs had a lot of grade A scoring chances throughout the series. I didn't think they had issues creating offense, and they just weren't able to score. And a big reason was the play of Bob.
I'll ask you this, though, Bruno, with regard to how well Bobrovsky played. Okay. Obviously, the numbers were there. He was peppered pretty hard. He stood tall. But do you think if someone said, did the Leafs get goalied, would you say they got goalied?
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I don't want to say that this series just came down to Bob stealing the series, because
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, he didn't steal it. That's how I would describe it.
I don't think he stole the series, but I also thought he was exceptional at the same time. Like, I think it's almost you say that Bobrovsky was phenomenal, but on the other hand, I think at the same time you could also say that the core four wasn't good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I would see it too, you said they had 91 shots and 3 goals. So the number that jumps out to you right away is like, okay, well, those 4, say you go average shooting percentage between the 4 of them, they should have had like 8 or 9, maybe 10 more goals just based on statistics. But then I do look back, and again, I remember Bobrovsky being solid and always being there, but I don't remember these like 10 foul saves where he's stealing a goal away, sliding across, getting a toe on it or a glove. And maybe I'm just misremembering, I don't know, like individual moments. But I'm not going to say it's an excuse just to point to Bobrovsky, and I'm not accusing you of doing that. I just, for fans out there, I don't think it's fair to use the old, oh, we got goalied, because I don't think we were good enough to say that, if I'm being perfectly honest.
So would you blame it on the core 4 then and their lack of production? Do you blame it on even the depth scoring, like the defensive issues? Because the Leafs did have some defensive brain farts in the series. But then I look at, I look across the league and I say, hold on a second. 4 of the 5 games were 1-goal games. This was the lowest scoring series in the second round. I think it just felt like the Leafs weren't good enough defensively, because every defensive mistake they made somehow ended up in their net. Yeah. And credit to the Panthers, because they were very opportunistic, but I didn't think the Leafs got outplayed significantly in this series. Like in the first round, I think we can both agree that Tampa outplayed the Leafs for the majority of that series. And again, whether that was like 52-48, 55-45 in favor of Tampa, whatever way you want to slice it. But in this series, for the most part, the Leafs controlled play. They outshot the Panthers by 20 shots. Four of the 5 games were 1-goal games, and they couldn't find a way to beat Bobrovsky, and they got to be better than that. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah. It's always a collection of things. And it's this time of year where people are going to point fingers. They're going to blame individual players. They're going to blame the defensive core. They're going to blame the core 4.
They're going to blame the coach.
I was going to say they're going to blame Keefe. Dubas didn't do the right things. It's a collection of everything. I was talking to a friend of mine who's coached at a high level, and he loves Matthews and Marner. He loves the way they play. He loves what they bring. And the point he made, and he's one of those guys, he doesn't watch hockey like the rest of us. He can really and truly break it down and see things that the normal fan doesn't see. And what he was saying about Matthews and Marner, he said the defense was doing a terrible job of getting them the puck. We couldn't move the puck up the ice fast enough, is what he was saying. So it's like, well, you can blame them all day long, but if they're not getting the puck in stride, or they're not getting the puck when they make their cuts, it doesn't matter. You're kind of useless out there. And maybe that's credit to Florida, not just blame to the Leafs defense. But when he said that, it kind of opened my eyes a little bit, because you do look at the D, and not necessarily from the defensive perspective, but puck movers. It's a weird thing, man. I know we're so analytics driven as a team, and every contract they give out, how they weigh things, is all based on math. But it's clear that the intention is that you don't, I shouldn't say the intention, the perspective is that you don't need to spend very much on your D. And I guess it's not about money per se, but in terms of the style of player, yeah, we could, after you said that, I kind of thought, yeah, we could have used 1 or 2 more puck movers, or guys who could skate at the back end. Like Hall can't skate. Giordano's older. I mean, we all love how we brought in Shen and McCabe, but that's not who they are. So it was up to Riley and Liljegren when he played.
And the Leafs had Rasmus Sandin and traded him at the deadline.
Yeah, and the whole thing with Sandin, you got reminded this time of year about what the playoffs actually look like. Yeah, no. Like the way we were getting forechecked by Tampa and Florida, and the hits that were being laid out, Sandin would have folded. And that's not a criticism to the kid. Maybe he will develop into a player who can tolerate that. But I don't think we can look back at this series and be like, oh, it would have been different if we had Rasmus Sandin. He would have been firing the puck up and creating offense and not have been a liability. So it's collective, man. It's on the D, the core 4. It's $40 million, man. $40 million on 4 guys. you have to score. You have to. And it's sometimes unfair when people point to athletes and they say, okay, like, I don't know, they'll say the point in basketball, like a Steph Curry, who like elevates his game in the playoffs, he'll go off. We've seen like the Michael Jordan, like the Joe Montana, those guys who have that reputation. When the playoffs come, it's showtime and you're going to lose. And it's kind of unfair. I've always said to be like, well, he should be Joe Montana. Well, there's one Joe Montana. Like, there's not many guys who can seriously elevate their game when it's time. But to the core four, I'd say specifically to the three of them, Marner, Tavares, and Matthews, you're paid like you're supposed to do that. I think I said last week or 2 weeks ago, you're not paid to be a star player. Your salary is not star player money. Your salary is elite dominant money. You're supposed to take games over. When you play in opposition, you're supposed to be too much for them. And because there's three of you, it should be way too much for them. And I know maybe I'm simplifying it, but they got to score. And like, again, like, let's be fair, between them, they had how many goals they have in the series? Matthews didn't score 3 goals this game. Matthews didn't score. So
Nylander had 2, Marner had 1.
There you go. So to me, there's so many things in this series. And you mentioned people are going to point to the refs or point to stupid little things. The things that jump out to me, and I'll look at the playoffs as a whole. Had someone told you, okay, the Leafs are going to play 2 rounds. They're going to go 1-5 at home. And they're going to score no more than 2 goals in their final 7 games. I'd be like, we're out.
It's time for a quick break because the Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and so are your friends at MANSCAPED. They're making sure you're at your best when it matters most. Use the Lawnmower 4.0 to chop through your bush, just like the best players in the world chop through defenders. You can have the smoothest balls in the league by going to manscaped.com and using our exclusive promo code GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping. Lepore Manscaped never misses with their amazing products.
They don't. As everyone knows, Anthony Bruno and I cheer for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Toronto Maple Leafs suck. So thank goodness we have our favorite products from Manscaped to cheer us up during times like this. As soon as this video is over, head over to manscaped.com. There's a whole whack of products. Throw some in your cart. Use the promo code GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping.
Gentlemen, you got to look your best, you got to feel your best, and you got to perform your best. And the way that you do that is with these amazing products from Manscaped. The Lawnmower 4.0, the Weed Whacker 2.0, the Boxers. I mean, go down the list. They have so many amazing products, and I promise you will not be disappointed because they are top-notch across the board. So get 20% off and free shipping using our exclusive promo code GFP20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping using the promo code GFP20 at manscaped.com. You can't go 1-5 at home. For a team that was that good at home in the regular season, the Leafs had the 3rd best home record in the NHL this year. To go 1-5 at home and to score 14 goals in their last 7 playoff games, that's not going to cut it.
No, it's insanity.
The offense just simply let them down. And we've talked about this on previous shows. It's like a broken record now. What happened last year at the end of the Tampa series? They weren't able to generate enough offense. The year before that against Montreal, weren't able to score enough goals when Jack Campbell actually played pretty well going head-to-head against Carey Price. What happened against Columbus? The Leafs scored 10 goals in that 5-game series against Columbus. And now you're seeing the same thing rear its ugly head. That to me was the most frustrating part. And didn't it seem, Lepore, and I guess this happened right after the trade deadline, and then once they integrated all the new guys into the lineup, it almost seemed like the Leafs became a dump and chase team, which was very frustrating because for most of the year and even going back to the last few seasons, they've been like a high-flying transition team, move the puck up quickly, activate the D, which they always activate the D. That's like a hallmark of Sheldon Keefe, where you see Morgan Riley flying around the O-zone. Same with Brody and McCabe. Like, think about all the odd man rushes that Jake McCabe randomly joined in this postseason.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. But anyway, you think about that, and I just think they they went away from that for whatever reason. And again, maybe it's because they thought that they needed to play a different style to win in the playoffs. The Leafs had a lot of hits in the playoffs. I believe they have the most hits of any team right now in the entire playoffs.
I was going to bring that up. I was going to bring that up, Bruno. I was going to bring up that one too. So as of yesterday, they were second in hits in the playoffs to the Kraken, and they were 15 back of the Kraken with one fewer game. So their average of hits per game would have been the highest, and blocks they had the most in fewer games than other teams. Yeah. So
the toughness, the grit, the heart, whatever the hell you want to call it, it was all there. What wasn't there was the offense and the goal scoring. You can't go 7 playoff games scoring 14 goals. You just can't do that. Scoring 2 goals a game for 7 consecutive games. Like you're just not going to win. If you go look on NHL.com right now, you sort it by goals per game. All the teams that are near the bottom in goals per game are all out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So as much as everyone thinks winning the Stanley Cup is about goaltending and defending well, and it is, I'm not going to say it's not. In today's NHL, man, you got to put goals on the board in the playoffs. And the Leafs, for whatever reason, with all the talent they have not been able to do that. And it's not just this season. It's now been the last few seasons where when it matters most, it has not necessarily been the defense and the goaltending that has let them down. It's been the offense. And that's contrary to what a lot of people think about when they think about the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I don't know how they address that moving forward, but a huge disappointment that they weren't able to score more goals.
Yeah. Of the 8 teams that made the second round, only New Jersey scored fewer goals than the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's horrible. It's simple. You're not going to win. To your point about how they changed their style, I was actually going to bring this up. I don't know if you saw BX during the intermission yesterday. He was talking about the Leafs Florida series. And the point he made was that, in his eyes anyway, so Toronto knew for months and months that they were going to play the Tampa Bay Lightning. They knew that that was going to be their opponent in the first round. And from what he saw, his opinion, they built a team to beat Tampa. They added all that weight. They added all that D that could withstand a forecheck. They added guys who could block shots, do all those things right. And the goal was to build a roster that was capable of beating the Tampa Bay Lightning. And he made the point you did about he thinks they kind of ventured away from their identity. And that came to bite them against Florida. Because I said it all year. You looked at this team. Fewer goals scored compared to previous seasons, but much fewer goals against, shots against. All the defensive metrics were better for Toronto this year. It was clear they were trying to slow things down. Then at the deadline, O'Reilly, defensive center, Achari, depth, McCabe, Shen, defensive guys who can hit. They wanted to win by soccer scores, as I said, okay? Against Florida, they needed the opposite because, to be fair, they all kind of were soccer scores in this game. They needed a high octane, high flying offense. Because I think it gets to the point where you see Tampa, and I'll say it, I think top to bottom, whatever the standings say, to me, Tampa is the best team in the league. Like, their cast of characters goes unmatched. They got guys who can score. They have depth. They have D. They have stars. They have a crazy Russian goalie. And throw in the coach, amazing coach. To me, they're the model roster. Okay. So for the Leafs to do that, to build a team like that to beat them, I get it. I totally get it. But then again, you move on to Florida and no, we're more talented than them. We're deeper than them. So let's have a track meet. I remember like even the Babcock days when the Leafs went through that phase of they'd win games 6-4, 7-3, 7-5, these high score, and be like, oh, the Leafs have no system. Look at all it's the back and forth play. They just scored their way out of problems. It's like, no. That's the system. The system is
that's what they needed in this series.
Bring on the track meet. We'll beat you in a track meet. And that's what they could have used against Florida. And the way the roster was constructed, clearly there was a problem. And again, going back to the point my buddy made about the D being able to move the puck, that's what you need to get flying, right? Guys who can skate, guys who can fire the puck up the ice. And I say all the time, today's NHL, if you can't move the puck as a defenseman, I don't want you. Because it's absolutely necessary. The days of that like stay-at-home D who just takes the guy out, he's a 5'6" now. He's a 5'6". You have to be able to skate and move the puck. And it was clear that's what lacked in this series. And if you're going to place like blame, like again, you don't lose for one reason. You lose for things you can control. You lose for things you can and can't control. If there's 4 guys making 40 million and they score 3 goals in 5 games, that's where you have to point your finger at the end of the day. Like,
it's
I
really
don't know,
as simple as that.
Yeah, I don't know what much you can talk about. Well, the depth didn't score. Well, yeah, I thought
They're not supposed to score.
Well, I thought Yarncroc was a ghost in this year in this playoffs, but I mean, come on. If we're going through the power rankings of guys we should blame if we can't score, Yarncroc ranks pretty low.
We're not blaming Yarncroc or Sam Lafferty or David Kampf. And some of those guys actually played well. Like Lafferty, I thought looked so explosive. Like he looked like one of the Leafs' most explosive forwards. And just to put a bow on this, the big issue that stood out to me for the Leafs in this series specifically was their lack of speed through the neutral zone. Like, for all the people that want to run William Nylander out of town, and I've talked about this, he might not be the Leafs' best player. You know, Matthews is their best player. Marner's the best playmaker. But who's the most explosive player with the puck? That is without question William Nylander. When you need a guy to get through the neutral zone with speed, to get a zone entry, to just take over a shift, it's not John Tavares. Mitch Marner, Mitch Marner can skate, and so can Matthews for that matter, but no one can chug the puck and make plays like William Nylander. And I just felt like the Leafs didn't have enough of those guys. And what's sad is that, like, outside of Nylander, it almost seemed like Sam Lafferty at times was like the second fastest player on the Leafs, who was able to like disrupt and create things in the offensive zone and get on the forecheck. So that's what disappointed me. The Leafs just lack speed. Like John Tavares is not moving out there. Ryan O'Reilly, I know the guy's won a Stanley Cup and a Conn Smythe. He wasn't moving out there. Go down the list. Austin Matthews at times looked a little bit slow in this series. Same with Mitch Marner. And I know they all got their scoring chances, but just in terms of like pure speed, team speed, I felt like the Leafs were a little bit too slow, and they need to address that in the offseason. Like 100%.
Like, look where we are, Bruno. Hashtag Leafs. Imagine someone told us in the summer we'd be sitting here after the Leafs are eliminated and going on and on about how the Leafs were slow. Like
insane.
Slow and couldn't move the puck. And then but the positive notes are most block shots, most hits, all that stuff. No, they couldn't. I mean, I'd say we'd be surprised to find out they couldn't score, but that's been the story every playoffs. And the thing is with Nylander, if there's one positive about these playoffs, to me anyway, like, it's the I told you so. And a lot of Leafs fans feel this way. I'm not going to say the criticism of Nylander and Riley is over, but I think a lot of people got like a fact check.
Yeah, like, can you imagine Riley wasn't on this team?
Oh my God.
We would have got swept against Tampa.
Yeah. Yeah. Here we are talking about the offense. Nylander was the only one moving. And it's so funny. We talk about grit and toughness. So Leafs fans saw when Matthews was in the handshake line, he had his it looked like his wrist or / hand was taped up. Okay. All season, we knew something was wrong with Matthews. He wasn't himself. He had little bursts of like a week here and there where he would look great, like, hey, he's back. But all playoffs, I'll say it, he still wasn't at his best. So now we see this wrist thing, and it's like, well, that could be it. And it doesn't take much. I mean, it's the NHL. Even if you're playing it 80% or 90%, it's a lot, man. Like I've played through injuries, and you're not the same player. To the point I'll make about Nylander, again, the long blonde hair, the cool gear, the attitude. When I say attitude, I mean like the cool attitude. People shit on him all day long about how soft he is and you can't win with him and this and that. In the last 3 seasons, in the shortened season, I think he missed 4 or 5 games. And in the last 2 seasons, he's missed 1 game.
He's durable, man. He's a strong dude. He doesn't get enough credit for that.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to sound kind of weird, but have you seen him on, he posted some pics, was it last year, 2 years ago on Instagram? He was on a beach with his brother, Alex. And you think, oh, Nylander or whatever, sweet. The guy's built like a truck. He had his shirt open. His core is like the size of my entire body with my arms. But say all you want about these players. I mean, staying healthy is a skill. And the whole Matthews thing, like, people will make excuses for it. we've already said on this show, there's so many things you can't control. One of them is injuries. Okay. I'm not knocking that guy. Oh, you got to play through them and whatever, which I mean, but it is kind of true. But at the same time, staying healthy is a talent. It really and truly is. And if we're being perfectly honest with ourselves, as amazing as Austin Matthews has been, he gets hurt. It's like, has he even played? Like, what's the most games he's played in an entire season? Was it last year because he only missed 5 or 6? Maybe the 56 game season, the shortened season. But
I'll tell you right now, I don't think he's ever played. Oh, just his rookie season. That's the only time he's played a full 82 game season.
Okay.
His sophomore year, 62 games, then 68 games, 70 games the year after that. But I believe that was the first
shortened year,
COVID season. Then you had the North Division season where he had 41 goals in 52 games. He missed 9 games last season in his 60 goal campaign. Mm-hmm. And then he missed 8 games this season. And no, you said it, man. It's hard to ignore that. Like, the dude he's not durable. I don't want to, it's not like Matthews is a Band-Aid and he's, compare him to like Matt Murray, for example. He's not as bad as Matt Murray when it comes to durability, but there's a track record now that this guy is not able to stay healthy for an entire season.
Yeah, I'd like to see the numbers, and we'd never be able to know this, but okay, so percentage of total games that he's missed throughout his career, and if we could add the amount of games he's played injured, it's probably pretty significant. If we're at a number of, like, say 20%, I wouldn't be surprised. You get Matthews for 4 to 5 games. And again, this is not just completely shit on him. A lot of it's bad luck and whatever. But I'm just saying, I'm more making the point about Nylander's durability being a good thing. And this guy being healthy, producing, and even the playoffs. I feel like we go through this every year. In the playoffs, Nylander shows up and we're like, you see, I told you so. And then the season starts and he's getting shit on again by all the idiots out there. It's crazy, man. Like these trade rumors, these like trade suggestions, you're all Nylander. I'm always like, why? Stays healthy, he puts up points, and he's good value. Why would you trade this? Like, what are you going to get? Like, you might be moving, at best, you're moving a deck chair. I don't know, man. Fans are funny, but
yeah, I'm telling you right now, for all the people that want to completely blow up this team, I said it on the last show, be very careful what you wish for with William Nylander, because you need guys like him to win in the playoffs. Like, there's no doubt about it. You remove him from the lineup and Morgan Riley from the lineup, just in terms of like explosiveness, ability to make plays with the puck, create offense for themselves and others. You need that in the playoffs. As much as we all want to talk about defense and goaltending, you got to be able to create offense in high leverage situations, and the Leafs failed to do that once again. So is there anything else from this series you want to get off your chest, or should we move into the future and talk about what we think is going to happen with this Leafs team moving forward?
No, the crystal ball thing. Yeah, let's do that. That'll be fun. I'm sure people are intrigued to know what we have to say about that.
All right, let's do it. So the Leafs go out in the second round. They have one playoff series victory in the entire Matthews, Marner, and Nylander era.
Gross.
Where do they go from here? And we'll start with the core four, because that's obviously the biggest question mark at this point, because there's a lot of people who want to blow up this team. There's a lot of people who want to break up the core four. The problem is it's not as easy as it seems. And we talked about this on the last show as well. Feel free to go back and look at our first conversation we had on the core four before the series even ended. But here's where the issue is. John Tavares is making $11 million and has a full no movement clause. He just had another child. He lives in Toronto. His wife, by all accounts, wants to be here. That guy's not going anywhere. All right. It's going to be extremely difficult to move John Tavares. So he's got a full no movement clause. And then what do you do with the other 3 guys? We've already talked about William Nylander and how you need guys like him to win in the playoffs. He was the Leafs' most explosive player the entire playoffs. He's due for a raise. And he's in the same boat as Austin Matthews, where they are both eligible to sign extensions on July 1st, 2023, which is coming up in less than 2 months from now. And then you have Mitch Marner. He has a no movement clause that kicks in on July 1st. just like Austin Matthews. So Matthews and Marner have a no move clause that kicks in July 1. Matthews and Nylander are eligible to sign extensions on July 1st. So what do you do? Because you basically have less than 2 months to figure this out, because if Matthews does not sign his extension on July 1st, you essentially have to trade him at that point. You cannot risk going into the final year of his contract and him playing that out and then leaving in free agency for nothing. So they have a lot of decisions to make. And then we don't even know if Dubas is going to be here. Who's the head coach going to be? So there's a lot of questions, Lepore. Where do you stand on this whole thing, specifically regarding the core four, before we move on to everybody else?
Well, I guess with regard to Matthew, so he's eligible to sign on July 1, but also the no movement clause kicks in on July 1. So you have to know before that.
100%.
if we're being perfectly honest, because it can be, July 1 or July 2, and he says, this is what I want, and I'm not willing to be traded anywhere. So now what? Now what do you do? So, and again, I'm sure they're calculating these things. As for Marner, I mean, like, is there a more, I don't know, polarizing is the right word, but I don't know if there's a player that you could have an open debate about more than Mitch Marner in the National Hockey League, because people can talk about salary and his contribution, whatever. If you're looking back, if you're looking objectively, here's a guy, a winger nominated for a Selke. If someone just said that to me, you have a winger who's nominated for the Selke. He's a 100-point guy, 99-point guy. Can you even fathom trying to trade that player or wanting to trade that player? But it's funny because, well, no, there is an argument here. And that's why the Leafs are so weird and different and fucking crazy, because you could have that discussion. Like you summed it up with Tavares. I mean, it's not happening. It's not happening. Like he's not moving. And to be fair, it would be a bad look for the organization, I think, too. Maybe if a new GM came in, he could say, well, this is my team, I'm doing it. But I know this is not what people want to hear, but I think that a lot of these decisions are going to be made for the Leafs, because really, like, if you're the Leafs, like, whatever talks are permitted or like rumblings between you and the agent before July 1, they gotta know, like, they have to at least have a vibe of where they stand with Matthews and Nylander too. So if Matthews is not willing to move, like, I don't know. My point is this: can you take the risk? Can you take the risk of having to pull the trigger quickly on that? I don't think you can. I think you have to. Let's say he doesn't want to be. Let's say you get to that point where he can sign, and you're negotiating. Can you take the risk of just shutting the door on the negotiations because this isn't working? But it's going to be sticky, man, because we said on previous shows in the playoffs about Matthews and his next contract. He had full control. Think of after last year, the 60-goal year. He had full fucking control of that boardroom, talking about his agent could have asked for anything. It's almost hard for me to think of something that would have been surprising. But now it's different. They lost again. They didn't look good again. He went goalless in a series they lost. So that's going to hurt us or it's going to help us. I don't know. But at the end of the day, do these guys want to stay? And people, these of course are going all over Twitter now, like the trade proposal. People like creating these trades. And the ones I love, and I'm saying that sarcastically, are we need to trade Marner for a 2C and a 3-4 D-man and a prospect. So you just created a magical trade. Like, is anyone available? Like, can this trade be made that's actually going to make us better and free up this cap space? You can always just say that. I could say, yeah, we need to trade Tavares for an $8 million defenseman and a $3 million depth center. Yeah, okay. Like, but does a team have that? And are they willing to trade that? So it's tougher than people think. And I'll say it, Bruno, I think we're in the same spot next year.
And that's what I'm thinking as well. Like, yeah. I don't think there's going to be a lot of significant changes here.
No.
Especially if Kyle Dubas is back. And who knows, maybe there's like a lot of pressure from MLSE and they go to Dubas and they're like, listen, like, we're going to re-sign you. We like what you've done with this team. We like the additions you made at the trade deadline. You've made more good decisions than bad. Like, we're going to re-sign you, but you got to mix it up here. You got to make a trade. You got to break up the core four. The problem is Tavares is obviously the anchor. Like, if you could get rid of Tavares in his $11 million contract, like, he is not aging well at all. I was talking to my friend about this. Like, we were looking at Joe Pavelski, 38 years old, scoring all these goals for the Dallas Stars in the playoffs. A guy who, like Tavares, is not a great skater. But still, at the age of 38, Joe Pavelski is finding ways to be a big-time difference maker in the playoffs. And to be fair to John Tavares, like, he had his moments in the first round. He scored the series-winning goal against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But he did not have a great year at even strength. He did not have a good second round. He looked slow in the playoffs. But, you know, you go around the league, it's like, can we get Joe Pavelski production out of you? Like, Joe Pavelski's 38 years old. John Tavares is 32. He's not that old. And that's
crazy, eh? 32 years old. It's crazy.
He's the same age as Steven Stamkos, who's just come off 2 Stanley Cup victories and played very well for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I know in one of the cup victories he was injured and he barely played, but again, like, I'm just making comparisons here. You need more out of John Tavares. That's clearly the anchor. Like, think about all the things you can do with that $11 million.
Yeah, it's about value. It's not about criticizing the player. We're in a cap league. There's no point of having discussions as to whether players are good or bad players. No, it's what's their value. And Tavares is a fantastic player. You can even call him an elite player. But as the point I made before, when you're in that stratosphere of cash, you have to be a difference maker, game breaker. And he's not. I mean, if he was making, say, 8 million, even maybe 9, I don't know if we're having this discussion because, hey, you get the point of game, you get the center, you get the leadership, whatever you want to add to the list. But at 11 million, that's rough. And it was free agencies. You can make that whole debate. But at the end of the day, we're here now. His contract's on the Cap Friendly website, and we're stuck with it for 2 more years.
I've even heard the take that the Leafs should just move Tavares to the wing. And I actually think that's a great take because even look at the center depth in the playoffs. Matthews, Tavares, O'Reilly. On paper, it looks great. But again, going back to the speed conversation, 2 of your top 3 centers are not very good skaters in John Tavares and Ryan O'Reilly. And again, we'll get into some of the other free agents like Ryan O'Reilly and Nola Chari and who we think might be back. But John Tavares is clearly the anchor, and it doesn't look like he's going anywhere. Do you move him to the wing? Do you try to bring in another centerman who can skate better? I think right now, Lepore, the big question is if Matthews re-signs, like, obviously you want to keep Austin Matthews. I think it's as simple as that. Like, let's not lose sight of how talented and how great of a player he is. And no one wants to hear this, but I believe he led the second round in individual scoring chances.
Oh, fuck, Bruno.
Like, he was right. I think he was like top 3. He may have led the second round in individual scoring chances. Like, he had plenty of high danger chances. Like, there's videos floating around. Like, people have made videos showing like all the clips of all the great scoring chances he had against Florida. You think about the stick save that Bobrovsky made on him. Even in overtime of Game 5, Matthews had a point-blank chance right in front of the net. No one around him couldn't beat Bobrovsky. So let's not kid ourselves here. The Leafs need Austin Matthews. He's still one of the best players in the league. He shouldn't go anywhere. So now the question to me becomes, like, do you look at moving Marner? But as you said, Lepore, it's insane to even think about when you think about this guy's a 2-time first-team All-Star, Selke Trophy nominee, 100-point player. But again, in the playoffs, he has shrunk a little bit. He hasn't scored when it matters. And I know he scored in Game 4 against the Panthers. He scored a really big goal. But you look at his playoff stats, which I have right in front of me at the moment here. So he's got 47 points in 50 career playoff games, which is fine. Nearly a point per game in the playoffs, only 10 goals. He's got 10 goals in 50 games in the playoffs. And sure, you're not paying him to be your number 1 goal scorer, but you expect a little bit more for a guy making as much money as he does. And, you know, you could make the argument that he has shrunk in the playoffs. His game doesn't translate quite as well to the playoffs. But what do you do? Because that's the move to me. is like, if you're going to break this up, Marner might be the guy that has to go. And I don't necessarily want the Leafs to trade him, but just based on the options that they have, that might be the best option available to them at this point.
Okay, let's play this game, Bruno. Let's play Crystal Ball Future with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Okay.
So here we have these 4 guys making this kind of money. Do you think this team for the next, let's say 2 years, okay, with those 4 guys, do they have the potential to be a very good team?
They do.
They do. A very, very good team.
Do.
Okay. So what I'll say, how I'll respond to that is, well, first of all, I'll agree with you. And my question was kind of like a fake question. It was obvious. Yes, they're a very good team with those 4. So, but the debate would be, well, again, the word value. Are you getting the value out of the 4? And will it translate to wins in the playoffs? John Tavares has 2 years left on his deal. Okay. The question I'm going to ask is it worth holding on to this core 4 for 2 more years? Again, if they want to stay, I mean, it's about contracts, but let's say they want to sign and the numbers aren't ridiculous. Is it worth keeping them and having them for 2 more years if it means going into that 3rd year and going forward? And when those 3, let's face it, are in the prime of their career, because much people think you're in your prime at 23, 24. You look at guys who win the Stanley Cup, they're old. They're older. They all win later than you think they're going to win. I've said a million times, I think youth is overrated in this league. So is it worth waiting the 2 years, keeping the 4, if in that 3rd year, Tavares is either going to completely come off the books and you can do what you want with that $11 million, or he's going to take a significant pay cut to play in Toronto?
Lepore, I think that's the most logical thing to do.
Yeah, it is. And people, I'm not saying they should do that, but I'm just saying that's tough to argue against, because let's say this team right now, for example, let's face it, Nylander, Marner, Matthews are going to be the same players 2 years from now, barring crazy injuries that slow them down. They're at that age where, no, there's not going to be that much of a downfall. If anything, there might be a raise to their game-breaking ability. So if we would have had these playoffs and just say not had John Tavares and sprinkled that $11 million throughout the lineup, the Leafs are way better. Way better. So then think of in 2 years, you can have all 3 still in their 20s and have Tavares at a homeboy Toronto salary playing on the wing. And then you can use that money to go get something else. And again, I'm not saying they should do this, because people could say, Lepore, shut your fucking mouth. This isn't working. It doesn't matter. And people are allowed to feel that way after another disappointing playoff series. But I'm just saying, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities. I really don't.
I think that's actually the most logical thing to do. As much as no one wants to hear that, and people are probably cursing at us right now and calling us idiots, that really is the most logical thing to do. And even if you look at it from a business perspective, if this team stays together, guess what, everyone? They're going to make the playoffs again next year, and then they're going to make the playoffs the year after that. And people are going to be showing up to the games, and MLSE is going to continue making money. What's important for MLSE? Like, obviously, they would make a ton of money if this team got to the Stanley Cup final, won a Stanley Cup. But getting to the playoffs is huge. Like, just from a business perspective, from a company perspective, you got to get to the playoffs. You got to win games. And this core has proven that they can do that. And when you think about this logically, maybe the best option is to actually just keep them together for the next couple of years. You wait for Tavares to come off the books. And then at that point, you retool or you rebuild and you try something new.
Yeah, I just looked it up. So 2 years from now, I just want to be sure of the numbers. Matthews will be 27. Marner will be 28. Nylander will be 29.
All
and
still young guys. All still younger than John Tavares is right now.
And now Tavares is on the wing. And again, I'm not saying, again, before everyone's freaking out, I'm just saying this thought process is going through the minds of the guys at MLSE. And you made the point, Bruno, about the money. Here's the thing I'll say. And this is a whole talk. We're going to have a podcast about that, about this thing I'm about to go off on. The team loves having guys like Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. Okay. They're young. They're fun. Think, man, like I tell people, you want to talk about the power of the Leafs? All you have to know is that they put Austin Matthews on the cover of NHL twice in 3 years. So you don't think they saw the numbers from the first one and saw how many copies were purchased just because he was on the box, for crying out loud? Marner's in every commercial. I'll ask you this, Bruno. Is William Nylander a top 20 player in the league?
That's probably pushing it a little bit. I don't think he's a top 20 player. Maybe you could make the argument he's a top 30 to 35 player potentially.
I think most people, let's say even like a top 50 player in the league, it's like wherever you have him on the list, count goalies, maybe not, but he's around there. Sherwood dropped a dump truck of money to his house to switch to their gear, for him to move away from Bauer and to switch to them. Why? Because he plays for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Bingo.
They didn't do it to McDavid. I mean, McDavid's a whole other stratosphere, but my point is, they didn't do it to Draisaitl. And he's a better player than Nylander. No, they went to him. And that's the power of the Leafs. But also, I'll say it, the young, good-looking Swede with long hair, the marketers like love it. So there's that whole thing. But at the same time here, and this is the talking point I wanted to get to, my entire life, okay, there was always the take that guys didn't want to play in Toronto. Those lists would come out, those polls with NHL players. Where do players not want to play? Toronto was always at the top or near the top. And the reasoning was, well, pressure, media. You can't go buy a pack of gum at the Quickie without getting mobbed for photos and autographs. So I get it. So it's kind of like my entire life, and even too how the Leafs were covered. You go through like the Carlisle years with Kessel and Phaneuf and Lupul and those guys. It would be weird for kids to hear this now, because I think of my nephew and like how he sees players. It wasn't cool to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It really wasn't. And I know it has to do a lot with their personalities, but no one thought Dion Phaneuf or Phil Kessel were like cool. Whereas these kids today love Marner and Matthews. They love Nylander. They love Riley. And Riley was there before, but people know my point. But I'm going to ask the question, because I think this is a real and true possibility. And I said before, it was pissing me off earlier in the playoffs when the Leafs are playing like shit. And then it goes to commercials and you see Tavares in a Proline commercial, Matthews in Bet99, Marner skip the dishes, Matthews Uber Eats. Like, kind of annoying. Like, guys, you're not playing well, but you're getting checks here. So have we gotten to the point where Shanahan and Dubas almost did too good of a job when it came to making guys comfortable? And now Toronto is too cool of a place to play, where it's too easy. You get your pay everywhere. And again, it's not just about money. People say, oh, he got his paycheck, now he's done. No, guys still want to win. Come on, it's reputation, it's ego. Guys want to win. But I've thought of that. I've definitely thought of that. It brings me back to Babs when he was asked about, will GTA kids want to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs? And he said, he's like, they'll want to come. We'll make it safe for them. And he was right. They've been able to draw guys from that area to play.
People are coming. John Tavares, Ryan O'Reilly, even Luke Shen, how happy he was to come back here after the Leafs drafted him. I know he's not a GTA guy, but guys want to come play here. And guys, Jason Spezza.
Yeah.
They want to try to win a Stanley Cup here with the core that's been in place. It obviously hasn't happened, but guys have wanted to come here and play.
Yeah, but I mean, comment down below what you think about this, everyone, because it's dawned on me, like, have we made this too fun? Have we made this too cool, too easy, too good for your social media to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs? Because this is where I'll say it, that makes you soft. That gets you to take your foot off the pedal, because you're not entitled to anything when it comes to the playoffs. You're not entitled to wins. You don't deserve anything. Here we are watching these playoffs. The Boston Bruins had essentially the greatest season in history of the league, and they were bounced in the first round. You're not entitled to anything if you're not prepared. So I think it's a good talking point, and I think it's maybe something that MLSE has to have a discussion about in the offseason. I really, unless they're having them already, saying we got to pump the brakes on how we're making these guys look outside the rink, because it's too good. It's changing their priorities. And even if it's subconsciously, their feet are not full on the gas pedal like they should be.
And maybe you could make the argument that they were paid a little bit too early. But again, like, Connor McDavid was paid early. And again, I know it's Connor McDavid and he's the best player in the world, And you can go and look at other examples across the league, even like a Jack Eichel, for example, who was paid early. Now, again, Jack Eichel's gone from Boston to Vegas, and now he's on the cusp of going to the Western Conference Final. Like, were Matthews and Marner paid too early? Potentially. They were given $11-12 million and all these endorsement deals when they hadn't accomplished anything in the NHL. You could make that argument. But before we get into Dubas and maybe even Keefe, because we are nearing the end of the podcast, quickly, I want to go over the UFAs, Lepore.
Oh, fun.
And we don't need fun. Detailed takes on Noel Acciari and Justin Hall, but just like kind of going down the list here. Who do you think is going to be back? So these are the Leafs UFAs: Kerfoot, O'Reilly, Kempf, Acciari, Bunting, Simmons, Aston Reese, Hall, Schenn, Gustafsson, and then a couple RFAs, one big one being obviously Ilya Samsonov and Victor Mete. So just going down that list, like, who would you like to see come back? Because honestly, I don't think very many of those guys are moving the needle. I don't know. Like, obviously I'd like Bunting to come back, but who knows how much money he's going to command on the open market. Yeah. He's probably gone. Going back to this speed conversation, it's like I'm beating a dead horse at this point. Like, do you even want Ryan O'Reilly back on this team? If you want a faster team that can score in the playoffs, like, I don't even know if you want O'Reilly back. Kerfoot, a lot of people don't like Alex Kerfoot in this market. And he clearly hasn't produced and hasn't lived up to what the Leafs and what fans thought he would provide. So just going down that list, is there anyone in particular who you would definitely want back on this team?
Gosh, go quickly. So I think Bunting's a goner. It's free agency. Someone's going to overpay him. He's going to get like, I don't know, a 3 times 12 or who knows, or a $12 million a year over 3 years, something like that is how I would picture. I think he's going to be maybe 3.5-4 million a year somewhere, and we're not going to pay him that. Kerfoot, I just think, hey, we're done here. And I like Kerf, but for the salary, like, I ain't giving him a raise. And even at the same salary, I'd be really and truly iffy on it. And I know a lot of Leafs fans would throw shit at it. So he's not going to take a pay cut again. He's hitting free agency. What I will say about the Kerfoot thing, though, is that 3.5 million, and you have to look at the lineup to see where things are going to move up and what's coming in, what's coming out. But I kind of saw that 3.5 million as a possibility to keep Ryan O'Reilly. And he obviously makes a lot more than that now. But I mean, we saw him play. O'Reilly's a piece, but he's not a core piece at this point of his career. So if someone's willing to give him stupid money or give him too much term, because like there's a lot of miles on those legs and you can see it in the way he plays, he's gone. But I wouldn't hate it if he got a short-ish deal and it replaced the Kerfoot money. I'd be okay with that.
That's fair.
Acciari at the million or whatever he makes, I would keep him.
Yeah, I think you need a guy like Noel Acciari in the bottom six. The physicality he brings, he's a good player.
I think we were all very content with what Acciari brought. And is it just me? Again, I just finished saying how easy it is for guys to play in Toronto. This whole cookie thing, that Noel Acciari really likes cookies, and it was all over social media. I'm like, I'm going to walk into Walmart and I'm going to see Noel Acciari on like the Oreos poster or something. I'm like, are they doing that on purpose to try to keep him because he's going to get that payday? I don't know. Schenn, again, I would keep for his salary.
Yeah, I thought Schenn was outstanding in the playoffs. Like, he exceeded all expectations, in my opinion.
The value's there, and here we are. We just went on a rant about how the Leafs have to get faster and get more scoring from their D, but he'd be in the depth.
Yeah, if you have him on your third pair, that's fine. A beautiful guy to have as a 5 or a 6.
Fine for $1 million. And I heard, I don't know if it was like a rumor or a fact, that he bought a house in Toronto next to Cabriolet. Was the rumor?
I believe I heard that. I don't know if he bought it. Maybe they were just like renting. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure.
I heard he bought. Whether that's true, I don't know. So if that means anything, I don't know. But again, at this point of his career, why would he really go anywhere else? Like, he's won his cups, and he's danced around a lot. He's obviously familiar with Toronto. He came back here, so it was something he obviously wanted to do. But am I forgetting anyone? Any other UFAs?
Justin Hall. I think
Justin Hall. I mean,
he's gone.
I hate to sound aggressive here, but again, he's free agency. He's going to want a raise. I hope we don't give him one. And again, the whole, if I was, I don't want to say if I was a bad player, let's just say if I was an average, everyday National Hockey League player who was like at those early to mid years of my career, I'd want to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs because you're going to get overpaid when you leave. You're going to get overpaid. Someone's going to want Justin Hall. Someone's going to
just because he played on the Leafs, and they're like, well, 100%. If the Leafs liked this guy and their analytics department thought he was good, then maybe, we can bring him in here and, he could be a good depth guy for us.
Yeah, but just in terms, I'm more mean it in terms of the coverage the Leafs get. Everybody knows the name, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the player you are, and specifically to Justin Hall. But all it takes is one. It's like Bunting. If Bunting played for the Carolina Hurricanes, he wouldn't get the same contract he's going to get this summer. No chance. And that's just, it's because it's like our unconscious workings of our brain. And when you see a lot of something, you're going to believe it. And when you're told something, you're going to believe it. It's like the whole joke of how all the Leafs players always get picked up when they go through waivers, because everyone knows who they are and they played for the Leafs. And yeah, I've heard of him.
It's that Leafs boost.
100%. So, and I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying that the guys could see the Toronto Maple Leafs as an opportunity if they're looking for a payday somewhere else.
So we're pretty much on the same page. Kerfoot's probably gone. Hall probably gone. You would like to bring back Achari. You would like to bring back O'Reilly if the contract makes sense. Like, not that I think Ryan O'Reilly's a bad player. I just think, it would be nice to have some more speed. You don't want to allocate a lot of money to a guy like that. And again, he's not that old. He's actually a year younger than John Tavares. But yeah, doesn't look like it at times because, again, both of those guys don't move particularly well. So, again, Luke Schenn, same thing. We're both on the same page. Would be nice to have him back as a depth guy. And then Samsonov, obviously, he's an RFA. They got to give him a new deal.
That'll be interesting.
He's most likely going to be, the starter, whether he's in a timeshare next year with Joseph Woll. I think that's how that's going to play out. And Matt Murray is probably going to be off to Robidaw Island.
Yeah, they have to figure that. Like. They have to figure that out because Joseph Woll next season is waiver eligible.
Yeah.
And if they put him on waivers, he's gone. So they can't just lose Woll for nothing. So they have to think long and hard about what they're going to do in the goaltending situation.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I do think it will be Samsonov and Woll next season. And then before we wrap up the pod, again, we are kind of getting up to the time here, but Dubas and Keefe. So here's what I'll say, Lepore. I think Dubas will be back. And we've talked about this on previous shows. I know you're in the same camp. Like, I think we can both agree that Dubas has done a pretty good job and that the failure of this team this season isn't really on Kyle Dubas, honestly. And again, I know we had that whole conversation that the Leafs kind of changed their style of play, specifically to beat Tampa. They weren't fast enough. And maybe you could say Dubas paid the young guys too early. And, he shouldn't have signed Tavares. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. You thought that they would get more out of the first 4 to 5 years of the Tavares contract than they've gotten. Simple as that. But I think Dubas will be back. Sheldon Keefe is interesting because you look around, not just in the NHL, but sports in general. Like, look at the Raptors. They were a great team, finishing at the top of the Eastern Conference every year. They fired Dwayne Casey, who was the coach of the year. They brought in Nick Nurse. You look at the Florida Panthers, firing Andrew Brunette and bringing in Paul Maurice after they got swept against the Tampa Bay Lightning in the second round. So I could see Keefe getting fired, and I know him and Dubas are very close, and they've come up the system together at all levels of hockey, and they're attached at the hip, so to speak, those two guys. But I could see him pulling the trigger on Keefe and just being like, listen, man, we've tried. It didn't work against Columbus, against Montreal. We lost in the first round at Tampa. You've only won one series here in 4 years as the head coach. I could see Keefe being out as head coach, but I do think that Dubas will sign an extension.
Yeah. I mean, I'd agree with you with that. I mean, if I put like a percentile on it, if someone said, will Kyle Dubas be back? I'd put it like 80% that I think he'd be back. Keefe, it's much more of a discussion. But if I had a guess, I think he'll be back.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. That's not me saying I want him back, but there's just this thing in me. I think it's going to be more of the same next year. And again, I could go off about whether I'm happy about it or not happy about it. And there's going to be a lot of episodes to talk about over the summer. We can go over these things, but I think just altogether, the core four is back, and I think the same GM is in place and the same guys behind the bench.
Wow. So Lepore, you think that they're just going to completely run it back?
I think they're going to completely run it back. And I think the point I made earlier, and again, let's just say everyone wants to stay, because then the decisions are made for you. It's over. But I just look to next year. You have the core four. Nyes is in the lineup. Hopefully Robertson's in the lineup. You see with these guys who are going to be free agents and RFA, Samsonov maybe can demand a little bit more money, but he can't go to the moon. Like, let's be real here. It's only been 1 year. And we'll see what happens with Murray. They got to blast that into the sun however they can. This team's going to be better next year. And that, again, that's not me saying I want this, because I don't really have a take on this. I just think it's so complex to me. And like I said, decisions are going to be made for them. But I just think they're going to see that in front of them. And those are things they can control. They're all back. We know we're going to be really good next year. And they'll see how things play out during the season. But I just think it's too tempting just to slam the door on that.
As crazy as this might sound, I agree with you, Lepore. Like, I think the most logical thing is to run it back. And maybe you don't completely run it back with everybody in place. Like we said, Dubas, Keefe, the core four. You know, maybe one or two of those guys are gone. Maybe Keefe is fired. Maybe they move a member of the core four again. Like, I looked at all the scenarios. Like, do you move Marner? I mean, like, I don't even think that really makes sense, even though we discussed that. It's all going to come down to Matthews. Does Matthews want to be here? Does he sign his extension on July 1? Because if Matthews is gone, the entire operation is blown to smithereens. And it's as simple as that.
It's just, again, and that doesn't mean to me I think they're going to blow it up. I just think this changes the approach now. Yeah. This full really and truly changes everything. So again, a lot of the decisions will be made for them.
Yeah, we're going to find out very soon. You know, this is all going to happen before July 1. Like, they're going to decide on Dubas. They're going to decide on Keefe. They're going to get a feel for what Matthews wants to do. Same with Nylander and what he wants on his next contract. But don't be surprised, Leafs Nation, if you come back next year, game 1, second week of October, and the core four is all here and Dubas is sitting up in the press box. Maybe there's a new head coach, but when you actually sit back and look at this logically, it actually does make a lot of sense to keep this team together and then reset when Tavares' contract comes off the books.
Yeah.
All right, Lepore, is there anything else you want to get off your chest before we wrap up this podcast?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to staying up really late tonight to watch the Knights and Oilers at 10 p.m. Eastern time. Way to go, NHL. Way to go. You have 2 series left. One has the best player in the world, and you put it at 10 p.m. Eastern. So very few on a Sunday. So very few people can watch it. Bravo, NHL. You always make us proud.
The NHL, they're just the best league in the world, aren't they? With their officiating, amazing. The way they sort out the schedule, all the decisions they make. I mean, what a first-class league, man.
Yeah, Hockey League. At least they get the All-Star Game skills competition, right?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, we could do an entire podcast.
We should.
On our thoughts.
If we ran the NHL for a week, everything we'd do differently.
Good Lord. But yeah, no, I agree with you, Lepore. I'm looking forward to the rest of the playoffs. Even though the Leafs are out, we'll see what the Oilers have. They got to come back down 3-2 against the Golden Knights. I mean, looking across the league, there's not too many exciting things happening. I know, like, the true hockey fans are excited for the rest of the playoffs, but a lot of the big name players are already out. A lot of the popular teams are already out. Let's see. We'll see what McDavid and Draisaitl can do. Maybe they'll come back against Vegas and they'll carry it home.
What a nightmare, and we're dragging this up, but what a nightmare for the NHL. They were probably looking at this playoff scenario a few weeks back and like, yeah, we're going to have Boston and New York in the Eastern Conference Final. And now you have Florida and Carolina. Wah, wah.
Not great for ratings, not great for fans, but it is what it is. That's hockey. The best team doesn't always win. When you compare it to the other sports, at least the big 4 sports, it's that one sport. And maybe baseball is kind of lumped in with hockey as well, where the best team in a 7-game series simply just does not win. Maybe they win a little more than 50% of the time, but There's a lot of stuff that happens on a hockey rink, a lot of things out of your control, and we are seeing it this year in the Stanley Cup playoffs, so there is a lot of wacky stuff going on. But that is going to do it for episode 104 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, the Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast, hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. If you are a first-time listener or a long-time listener, it would be a big-time help if you give us a 5-star rating on either Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you're watching us on YouTube and you really enjoy the content, please smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, because I believe only 25% of you who watch these videos are actually subscribed to the channel. So please smash that subscribe button as well. Leave a comment down below on what you want to see happen with this team moving forward, with the core four, the coaching staff, the front office. We would love to hear your thoughts and opinions as well. And ring that notification bell so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. For Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno. Enjoy the rest of the playoffs, and we will talk to you guys very, very soon.
Thanks, everyone.